In 1897, British forces entered one of West Africa's most important cities. When they left, the ruler was gone. The palace had been emptied, and thousands of royal objects had begun a journey across the world. Some became museum treasures, some became auction pieces, some became evidence. But the question is not what was taken. Why destroy it? The official answer sounds straightforward. A British party led by acting consul James Phillips attempted to enter Benin territory. The group was attacked on the road. Multiple members of the expedition lost their lives. Britain responded with what it called a punitive expedition, which is a very official way of saying, "We are bringing a lot of guns, and we would like this to sound administrative." And to be clear, the deaths of Phillips' party mattered. That became the trigger. But history has a habit of hiding complexity behind short explanations. And if we want to understand why Benin City was destroyed, we need to understand what Britain was actually walking into. First, Benin was not the modern country called Benin. This kingdom existed in what is now southern Nigeria, and this was not some isolated settlement waiting to be discovered like an unfinished side quest. Benin had rulers, institutions, trade, military power, diplomacy. For centuries, the kingdom built systems strong enough to survive rulers, wars, and changing trade networks. That does not happen accidentally. And then there were the bronzes, which are called bronzes, even though many are actually brass. History naming things badly is apparently a global tradition. Benin developed defensive earthworks, walls, moats, and an urban system that impressed outside visitors. This was infrastructure, not mythology. These objects were not simply decoration. They preserved rulers, ceremonies, authority, memory. Benin was preserving history in metal. So why did tensions build? Trade, mostly trade. Because empires become very interested when valuable resources start moving through places they do not control. By the late 19th century, British officials increasingly wanted greater access to commerce in the region. So if Benin was powerful, why was Britain pushing into it in the first place? To answer that, we need to talk about one man, James Phillips. Phillips was acting consul general for Britain in the region, and before entering Benin territory, he had already been writing about trade, influence, access, and opening the kingdom to greater British control. Those words sound bureaucratic, but bureaucratic language has started a surprising number of invasions. And here is where things get strange. Multiple accounts suggest warnings existed. Benin officials reportedly advised against entering during an important ceremonial period, warnings that traveling now could create problems. Phillips went anyway. Then came January 1897. Phillips and his party moved toward Benin, and on the road, the expedition was attacked. Multiple members of the group lost their lives. Britain now had something empires have historically used very effectively, a justification. But what exactly was Benin City? Because if Britain launched a full military expedition, the target probably mattered. A lot. European visitors described organized districts, broad streets, large earthworks, complex administration, which creates an uncomfortable question. Why are so many people hearing this for the first time? Benin's earthworks stretched across enormous distances. Some researchers argue they represented one of humanity's largest earthwork systems. Not myth, not legend, engineering. And at the center of this system sat the palace. Not simply a residence, a political machine, a religious center, an archive, a kingdom storing memory. When people hear Benin Bronzes, they usually imagine statues. That is only part of the story. Some plaques recorded rulers, some showed military victories, others documented interactions with foreign traders. Many functioned like historical records, except these records were cast in metal. Royal heads represented continuity. Ivory objects represented authority. Court objects reinforced power. Removing them was not only economic, it was symbolic. And after 1897, these objects begin appearing in catalogues, museums, private collections, auction houses. History left paperwork, again. Today, the argument has shifted. The question is no longer, what happened? The question is, what happens now? Supporters of restitution argue, these objects were taken during conquest, return them. Museums often argue, global collections preserve world history, keep them accessible. And this debate matters because the objects are not only art, they are evidence. Evidence of what Benin was, and evidence of what happened to it.
But there is another question here. One historians still argue about what exactly was lost. Because when people hear about the Benin Bronzes, they usually imagine museum objects, metal, art, objects behind glass. But kingdoms are not built from objects. They are built from systems. The palace was not simply where rulers lived. It was administration, memory, religion, diplomacy, production, knowledge. And when military expeditions destroy political centers, the damage rarely stays inside the walls. Records disappear, guild structures weaken, skilled networks fracture, communities reorganize around absence, and absence is difficult to measure. Because history is very good at recording what survives, it is much worse at recording what stopped existing. Today, pieces of Benin exist across dozens of museums and collections. Some have returned, many have not. And the debate has moved beyond simple ownership, because people are now asking different questions. Who gets to tell the story? Who gets to keep the evidence? And what responsibility comes with possession? Supporters of retention argue global museums preserve world heritage. Supporters of return argue preservation does not automatically equal ownership. More institutions now sit somewhere in the middle: long-term loans, shared custody, digital archives, partnership agreements. Which means this story still has no clean ending. Maybe that is why the argument keeps surviving. Not because people disagree about what happened, but because they disagree about what justice looks like after more than a century. The expedition ended in 1897. The consequences did not. And maybe the strangest part of this story is that many of the arguments happening today would have sounded familiar to people living through the expedition itself. Because even in 1897, not everyone agreed. Some British observers celebrated the destruction as necessary. Others described the scale of looting in uncomfortable detail. Newspapers debated it, officials defended it, collectors rushed to acquire pieces from it, and museums transformed war trophies into cultural objects. Over time, the language changed. Expedition became collection, looting became acquisition, possession became preservation. History often does this, not by changing events, but by changing the words used to describe them. Which is why source material matters. Because when you go back to expedition reports, museum records, shipping manifests, auction catalogues and correspondence, you stop looking at one event. You start seeing a chain reaction, an expedition, a market, a redistribution network, a century of ownership disputes. And now, a generation trying to reconstruct pieces of a story spread across continents. Maybe that is why Benin still feels unfinished. Not because historians lack evidence, but because evidence itself became part of the story. And once objects stop being only objects, they become memory, identity, proof. and proof is difficult to ignore. And maybe that is the real reason this story still matters, because the objects survived, the arguments survived, and the questions survived too. If pieces of a civilization remain scattered across the world, when does the expedition actually end?